In this tutorial, you're going to learn all about the exciting world of logic. Pay no attention to Cuthbert. It's not as complicated as it sounds. I promise. Let's check out the scene. See the buttons on the platforms in front of our good friend Connie? They activate the bridges that will take her to the next platform. At least that's what they're supposed to do. To get them working, you'll need to connect them to the gadgets that control them. You can't see gadgets when you're in play mode, but they let you do all sorts of useful things in edit mode. You can tell gadgets apart by their color and icons. Green gadgets are sensors and inputs. This one is what we call a trigger zone. It's one of the more versatile gadgets. It can trigger other gadgets when it detects something in the scene. Like in this case, Connie standing on the button. Hi, Connie! If you select the gadget with X, you'll be able to see its detection zone. That's it, right there above the button. Press the circle button to deselect the trigger zone, and let's look at the next gadget. Pink gadgets are movers and outputs, meaning they make things happen in the scene. This particular gadget is a rotator, and it's connected to the first bridge. Click R3 to start time, and let's see what it does. Well, not a lot right now by the looks of it. That's because the rotator is switched off. You can tell because the gadget is dim at the moment. But if we connect these two gadgets together, we can turn the rotator on using the trigger zone. In the next step, I'll show you how. Before we start connecting things, make sure you can see both gadgets. You'll notice they have ports sticking out of their sides. Ports on the left are inputs, and the ones on the right are outputs. Hover over the output port on the trigger zone now. You'll see the word detected appear. That means that when the trigger zone detects something, this output will send a signal. Before it can send that signal to the rotator, though, we'll need to connect them with a wire. So hover over the detected output and press R2 or X. You'll notice your imp is now tethered to the port by a wire. Power ports have appeared on the gadgets too. It's these ports that switch gadgets on or off. OK, drag the wire over to the rotator gadget. Now hover over the power port at the bottom, then press R2 or X. Once the gadgets are connected, the wire will disappear automatically. That way, your scene won't get cluttered. After all, you don't want wires all over the place. You can see the wire again by hovering over either gadget. OK, time to test our connection out. So let's switch over to play mode in the options menu. That's more like it. Now the trigger zone detects Connie when she stands on the button and activates the rotator on the bridge. As soon as she steps off, the rotator stops working. You can use the button to get the bridge lined up with the platform. Once Connie can make it to the second platform, you can head back to edit mode and move on to the next step. Now that we've connected the rotator, let's take a look at the second platform. See the yellow gadget on its side? This gadget isn't a sensor or an output. It's called a microchip. Microchips are used to organize logic in scenes. You can think of them as boxes of gadgets and wires. Let's have a look inside. Hover over this one with your imp. Hold L1 and press X. It's just like scoping into a group of objects. This window is the microchip's canvas. And if these gadgets look familiar, it's because they're two rotators. Each one controls half of this jointed drawbridge. Try to connect the output from the trigger zone to the power ports on the rotators. You can create multiple wires from the same output. Or you can clone wires in the scene by holding L1, then grabbing them with R2. Clone the wire near the rotator to create a new wire from the trigger zone. Once you've connected the trigger zone to the second rotator, switch over to play mode and make sure it's all working. OK, jumping on the button now will activate the trigger zone and raise the drawbridge so that you can cross over the... Oh, wait a minute. The bridge has dropped down before Connie could cross. That's because the signal to the rotator stopped sending as soon as Connie stepped off the trigger zone. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. In the next step, I'll show you how to make signals stay on. If we want the bridge to stay up, we'll need to add a gadget between the trigger zone and the rotator to keep it activated. We can do this with a counter. So let's go into the assembly menu. Press square to open it if it's closed. Select the gadgets menu with X. You'll find the counter in the logic and processing section. The gadgets in this menu take an input signal and change it in some way before sending it on. Go ahead and select the counter. Its icon is a tally counter. Now you can see the gadget on your IMP. Hover over the microchip and it will snap to the canvas. Press R2 or X to stamp the counter onto the microchip, then press circle to unequip it. The counter gadget counts up or down whenever it receives a signal through its inputs. By default, it starts its count at 0 and has a target of 1. Once it reaches that target, it sends a constant signal through its counter-full output port. Before we connect it though, let's tidy up the wires connecting the trigger zone to the rotators. Just hover over them and press triangle to delete them. Now press R2 or X over the detected output of the trigger zone to create a new wire. Connect it to the increase count input port on the counter. That's the port with the plus sign icon. Now when the trigger zone is activated, the counter will go up to 1. And, this is the important part, it will stay at 1 even after the trigger zone deactivates. Now hover over the counter-full output port of the counter. This port sends a signal when the counter reaches its target. Create a wire with R2 or X and connect it to one of the rotator's power ports. Then do the same for the other one. Time to switch to play mode and try out our new connections. When you're happy everything's working as it should, return to edit mode and move on to the next step. Just one more bridge for Connie to cross. As you can see, we have another microchip on the platform, so let's open it up. Hover over it with your IMP, hold L1 and press X. OK, looks like we have everything we need here. But Connie's an adventurer, so how about we make this last bridge more challenging? Adding a timer to the logic should get the adrenaline going. Once Connie activates the button, she'll only have a few seconds to cross before the bridge drops back down. Let's head back to the assembly menu. If it isn't already open, press square. Then go into the Gadgets section. You'll find the timer in the same place as the counter, the Logic and Processing section. Its button has a clock face on it. Now go ahead and stamp the timer gadget onto the microchip with R2 or X. Then unequip it from your IMP with the circle button. Now let's take a closer look at the timer's inputs and outputs. You can see their names by hovering over the ports. The first input is a start timer port. Once this receives a signal, it will start the clock. The second one is reset timer, which sets the time back to 0. Over on the output side, we have timer finished and timer output. Timer finished sends a signal when the timer reaches the required number. It's set to 5 seconds by default. Timer output is a little more sophisticated. The signal it sends represents the timer's current progress. If, let's say, it's only halfway to its target, the signal it sends will be half strength. So how do we connect this so the bridge only stays up for a few seconds? Well, we need the bridge to be raised while the timer is running. So create a wire on the timer output with R2 or X. Remember how we used the counter on the previous platform? We can use one here too. Just like before, connect the wire to the counter's increase count input. Then connect the counter full output to the rotator's power port. Time to see if it works. Click R3 to test it out. As you can see, since the timer isn't connected to a trigger yet, the clock starts ticking as soon as we play the scene. The bridge goes up, but doesn't drop down when the timer finishes. That can only mean one thing. There's a problem with the logic. If you'd like to figure it out for yourself, feel free to check the gadgets and see what's wrong. Or move on to the next step and we'll go through it together. So let's take a look at why the bridge stayed up after the timer finished instead of going back down. Remember how we used the counter earlier to remember the signal from the trigger zone? Well, now it's remembering the signal from the timer, so we need to make it forget that once the timer finishes. Let's go over to the counter gadget. Hover over the inputs to see their names. This one here is reset count. It'll put the counter back to 0, which will turn off the rotator. So all we need to do is connect it to the timer, but to which output? Aha! There we go. We can use the timer finished output. Count input will only work once. Connect the trigger zone to the start timer port. Connie activates the trigger zone, which sends a signal to start the timer. Once the clock starts running, the timer output becomes active. This tells the counter to count up. That then turns on the rotator and raises the bridge. Now this is where the really clever stuff kicks in. After 5 seconds, the timer finishes its count, which activates the timer finished output. This in turn resets the counter to 0, cutting the signal to the rotators and lowering the bridge. And let's not forget, it also resets the timer, so the logic could be triggered again if Connie didn't cross the bridge the first time. Isn't logic exhilarating? Take your time digesting all that. Logic is easier to read if you route your wires neatly. Grab wires with X to change their paths. You can also move the gadgets around by grabbing them with R2. Feel free to test it out in play mode, but don't leave the scene just yet. I have one more thing to show you. So, on the third platform, we've set up a timer that makes the bridge drop after 5 seconds. But I think that might be too easy for a seasoned pro like Connie. Let's make it a little bit more challenging. First, if you're in play mode, switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. Let's move in closer to the microchip with the timer. You can use the grab cam, R1, to move your view. Now I'll show you how to tweak a gadget's settings. Hover over the timer gadget, hold L1 and press square. This tweak menu contains the settings for the timer. Hover over the sliders and buttons to see their names. The top slider sets the target time for the timer. If we lower this setting, the bridge will stay up for a shorter time. To adjust the value, hover your imp over the slider, then hold X. Use your imp to drag the slider left or right. Set it to around 3 seconds. It doesn't have to be exact. If you're a stickler for precision, you can adjust the slider incrementally using the up and down directional buttons. Just hover your imp over the slider and press up or down to tweak the value. In fact, why don't we make things really interesting for Connie? Let's set it to 2.5 seconds. You can close the tweak menu now by selecting the cross in the top corner with X. Or you could use a shortcut. Just hold L1, then press circle while hovering over the menu to close it quickly. The same shortcut works for closing microchips. Give it a try now. Hold L1, then hover your imp over the microchip and press circle. Time to test out the scene in play mode. If you have any problems crossing that last bridge, you can always tweak the timer again in edit mode. Remember, you just hover over the gadget, hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. When you're all set, take Connie to the last platform and walk through the door to complete this tutorial. In this tutorial, you'll use logic to make health go up and go down. Oh, Cuthbert. Let's start by going into play mode. See if you can get Connie across that first gap. Oops. Sorry, Connie. I forgot to fix that. Don't worry, though. Even after falling such a long way, Connie's just fine. There's only one problem. There's no way for her to get back up. What we need is for Connie to respawn on a platform if she falls. So that's going to be our next job. First, switch back to edit mode. Remember to rewind time with L3 as we always do after play mode. In order to make Connie respawn, we're going to use a health modifier gadget. We'll use it to make the floor around the platforms lethal. Health modifiers can damage or heal anything that has a health manager. And, as luck would have it, Connie has one built into her logic. Go to the assembly menu. Open it with the square button if it's closed. Select the gadgets menu, the one with the 3 connected squares. You'll find the health modifier in the movers and output section, which is represented by a box with an arrow. Now select the button that has a clockwork heart on it. Your imp will now be equipped with a health modifier gadget. Stamp it somewhere central, near the floor, using R2 or X. Then unequip the gadget with circle. Your scene now has a health modifier, but to make it work as intended, we'll have to tweak it first. We'll do that in the next step. In this tutorial, you'll use logic to make help start up. What we need is for Connie to respawn on a platform if she falls. So that's going to be our next job. First, switch back to edit mode. Remember to rewind time with L3 as we always do after play mode. In order to make Connie respawn, we're going to use a health modifier gadget. We'll use it to make the floor around the platforms lethal. Health modifiers can damage or heal anything that has a health manager. And, as luck would have it, Connie has one built into her logic. Go to the assembly menu. Open it with the square button if it's closed. Select the gadgets menu, the one with the 3 connected squares. You'll find the health modifier in the movers and output section, which is represented by a box with an arrow. Now select the button that has a clockwork heart on it. Your imp will now be equipped with a health modifier gadget. Stamp it somewhere central, near the floor, using R2 or X. Then unequip the gadget with circle. Your scene now has a health modifier, but to make it work as intended, we'll have to tweak it first. We'll do that in the next step. Let's go ahead and open the Health Modifiers Tweak menu. Hover over it, hold L1 and press square. Here you can set the options for how the health modifier works. That includes how much health is modified, which is shown in the first slider. Right now, it's set to -100. This means it will take 100 health points away from anything it affects. Just enough to make Connie respawn. The modifier mode is set to per hit, so 100 health points will be taken away when anything touches it. But since we want the area around the platforms to be lethal, we need to set the modifier type to zone. Select the zone icon with X now, then go to the Zone Properties tab so we can change its size and shape. The icon is at the top of the menu and looks like a box in a zone. Look for the Zone Shape section of the menu, then select the cube. You can use the zone sliders to make the zone bigger. Be careful not to make it too tall. The respawn zone should be level with the pink lines around the platforms. If you need to, move the health modifier gadget nearer to the floor. When you hover over the edges of the zone, you'll see white arrow gizmos appear. Grabbing these with R2 will let you change the size of the zone. Using those, you can make sure the area. Look for the icon is at the top of the menu and looks like a box in a zone. But since we want the area around the platforms to be lethal, we need to set the modifier type to zone. Select the zone icon with X now, then go to the Zone Properties tab so we can change its size and shape. The icon is at the top of the menu and looks like a box in a zone. Look for the Zone Shape section of the menu, then select the cube. You can use the zone sliders to make the zone bigger. Be careful not to make it too tall. The respawn zone should be level with the pink lines around the platforms. If you need to, move the health modifier gadget nearer to the floor. When you hover over the edges of the zone, you'll see white arrow gizmos appear. Grabbing these with R2 will let you change the size of the zone. Using those, you can make sure the area around the platforms is covered. Now let's test it in play mode and see what happens. Perfect. If Connie falls off now, she'll just respawn back on the platform. Before we move on, maybe we should do something about this booby-trapped bridge. Switch back to edit mode and rewind time with L3. There. See what's causing it? It's that trigger zone. When Connie activates it, the bridge collapses and there's no way across. If you've finished the first logic tutorial, you'll know that the counter is being used to remember the trigger zone has been activated. If you follow the wires, you'll see there's one connected to each block. These red dots on the blocks are not gadgets. They show that a wire is connected to a setting in the block's tweak menu. Explore the logic for yourself. Or, if you want to move on and get Connie on her way, just delete the trigger zone by pressing triangle over it. That'll prevent any of the logic from activating. Then, once Connie can safely make it to the second platform, move on to the next step. Now's probably a good time to show you how to add checkpoints. When playable characters like Connie activate a checkpoint, the scene remembers their progress. So when they respawn, they'll appear at the last checkpoint instead of starting off at the beginning. Go to the assembly menu, then The Gadgets menu. If the last section you used is still open, close it by pressing circle over it. Expand the Gameplay Gear section with X, then select the checkpoint. It's the one that looks like a location marker. There. Now your imp is equipped with a checkpoint gadget. The direction of a checkpoint determines which way a character will face when it respawns. So make sure the front of the gadget, the side with the black outline, is facing the direction you want Connie to face. Remove the gadget from your imp with the circle button, then open the Checkpoints Tweak menu. Checkpoints use a detection zone equipped with a checkpoint gadget, then select the checkpointing off at the beginning. Go to the Assembly menu, then the Gadgets menu. If the last section you used is still open, close it by pressing circle over it. Expand the Gameplay Gear section with X, then select the checkpoint. It's the one that looks like a location marker. There. Now your imp is equipped with a checkpoint gadget. The direction of a checkpoint determines which way a character will face when it respawns. So make sure the front of the gadget, the side with the black outline, is facing the direction you want Connie to face. Remove the gadget from your imp with the circle button, then open the Checkpoints Tweak menu. Checkpoints use a detection zone, just like health modifiers. So select the Zone Size tab from the menu. This is set to a sphere by default, but to make sure it can't be missed, let's change it to a cube. You can use the zone size sliders to make the checkpoint cover the width of the platform. Above the gadget, you'll see a white Move gizmo. Grab it with R2 to put the activation zone where you want it. Just make sure Connie can't miss it. The white handle shows the direction Connie will face when she respawns. Check that it's pointing the right way. Grab it with R2 if you need to adjust it. Let's close that tweak menu with L1 and circle. Now try it out in play mode to see if the checkpoint remembers your progress. Sorry, Connie. We're gonna have to respawn you again. But it's all in the name of science, I promise. Great, there she is, right at the checkpoint again. When you're ready, go back to edit mode, rewind time, and move on to the next step. This next bridge looks a bit too hot to walk on. But Connie's a tough explorer, and she's always ready for danger, so let's give it a go. Okay, that block's too big for Connie to jump over. Better get her back to safety before it's too late. Let's switch back to edit mode and see how the bridge is damaging Connie. Move closer to the bridge and keep an eye out for any gadgets attached to it. Ah, there's one. A clockwork heart icon, so it's another health modifier. It looks like, instead of using a zone, this one is attached to the bridge. So whenever Connie walks on it, she loses health. If only that block wasn't in the way, she could make it across. But what if the block itself could lose health? We could give it a health manager of its own and see how that works out. Go to the Assembly menu, then open the Gadgets menu. You may need to close the Gameplay Gear section if you opened it earlier. Then you can expand the Movers and Output section. Look for a heart icon, not the clockwork heart this time. Select it with X to give your imp a health manager gadget. Stamp one near the block with R2 or X, then press circle to unequip it from your imp. To make the health manager affect the block, we'll need to attach it. The easiest way to attach gadgets to objects is to use what we call Surface Snap. Grab the health manager with R2 and hold it over the block. All you have to do to activate Surface Snap is hold L1 while your imp holds the gadget. This makes it hug the surface of any object you hover over. Now release R2 to attach the gadget to the block. You can also let go of L1 to stop using Surface Snap. In the next step, I'll show you how to tweak this health manager. Now that we've given the block health, let's take a closer look at it. Hover over the health manager, hold L1 and press square to open its tweak menu. The sliders here define the block's maximum and current health. Click R3 to play time, and you'll see the health starts to go down. That's because the bridge's health modifier is damaging it. But you'll notice it's going down much slower than Connie's health was when she was on the bridge. The reason for that is this health manager has a 1-second cooldown. So whenever the block takes damage, it's invulnerable for 1 second after that. Grab the cooldown slider with X and pull it to the left with your imp. So what happens when it reaches 0? Not a lot right now. But we can deal with that in the next step. For now, feel free to experiment with the health manager settings. Start time with R3 to see your changes, then rewind it with L3 to reset the health manager. Once you're done, you can move on to the next step. An object doesn't automatically get destroyed when it runs out of health, so we need to do a bit more work before we can get rid of that block. Let's take a closer look at its health manager. If its tweak menu is still open, close that first with L1 and circle. See the output ports on its right edge. Hover over the one at the bottom, the one that has a heart with a cross over it. This is the no health output, which sends a signal when the health manager is depleted. It can be used to trigger any number of things, but right now, We're going to use it to destroy the block. Go to the Assembly menu and take a look in the Gadgets section. It may still be open from earlier when you selected the Health Manager. Look for a skull icon on a button in the Movers and Output section and select it with X. This is the Destroyer gadget. It destroys whatever it's attached to. To attach it to the block, we can use Surface Snap. So hover the Destroyer over the block, hold L1 to make it surface snap, and press R2 or X to stamp it. Now you can unequip the Destroyer gadget with Circle. OK, before we connect it up, let's just see if it works by clicking R3. Oh, it works all right. When time is running, the Destroyer activates and destroys the block. Rewind time with L3 to bring it back. We don't want the Destroyer to activate until the block's health has run out. To do that, we'll need to connect the No Health output port to the Destroyer's power. So hover your imp over the Health Manager's No Health output port and press R2 or X to create a wire. This will make power ports appear on the gadgets in the scene. Stretch the wire over to the Destroyer and connect it to the power port with R2 or X. Great! Time to test it again with R3 and see what happens. When the block's health runs out, it will get destroyed, leaving the path clear for Connie. But how do we know how much health the block has left? We could always look at its tweak menu, but you can't see that in play mode. So click L3 to rewind time, and I'll show you how to display health in the next step. If the Health Manager's tweak menu isn't open already, open it now with L1 and square. When you hover over the menu sliders and buttons, you'll see ports popping out of the side. These work just like the ones on the outside of the gadget, but there are a lot more of them. And you might also have noticed that there's another gadget stamped on the side of the block. That's a number displayer. If we connect a wire from the current health output to the number displayer's input port, we'll be able to see the block's health count down in play mode. So let's go ahead and do that. Hover over the current health slider's output port. Then press R2 or X to create a wire and stretch it to the number displayer. Once you've connected it to its input with R2 or X, you can switch over to play mode and test out the whole scene so far. Excellent. Now we can see the block taking damage until it's destroyed. Once you can get Connie to the next platform, switch back to edit mode and move on to the next step. Well, Connie made it through, but she's a bit worse for wear. The burn effect you see on her is triggered by the current health output from her Health Manager. It gives you a visual cue of her health. The more singed she gets, the less health she has. I'm not sure poor Connie has enough health left to make it across the last bridge. What she needs is a bit of healing, so let's create a healing zone where she can recharge. This green pad looks like a good place to recover. We can turn it into a healing zone by placing a health modifier on it using Surface Snap. You've used Surface Snap before, so this should be no problem. Go to the Assembly menu and select a health modifier from the Movers and Output menu. It's the one with the clockwork heart on it, remember? Now activate Surface Snap by holding L1. Then attach the health modifier to the green pad. Now you can unequip the gadget with the circle button and open the Modifiers Tweak menu. We need to change it so it heals Connie. The health modifier is set to -100 by default, which won't do Connie any good. She has 100 health to start with, so that will take it all away and make her respawn. Grab the slider with X, drag it right, and set it to +20. We want the healing zone to heal Connie while she's standing on it, so you also need to set the modifier mode to continuous. You can leave the modifier type as impact, since you've snapped the health modifier to the platform. And that's all there is to it. Close the tweak menu with L1 and circle, and give it a try in play mode. All right. That should give Connie the health boost she needs to cross that final bridge. Oh, she's been through a lot today, so take her through the door to end this tutorial. This tutorial is all about connectors. Something Cuthbert hasn't quite got the hang of. Connectors join objects together in a way that lets them move. We're going to use them to help Connie get to Cuthbert. First things first, though, we need to be precise when using connectors, so let's turn on the grid snap guide. That way, everything will line up properly. So, go to the Assembly menu and open the Guides section. Now select the grid icon with the X button. Now that grid snap is on, any objects you move and tools you use will snap in line with the grid in the scene. You can adjust how fine the grid is using the plus and minus icons on the button. But for this tutorial, it's best if you leave the grid size at 1. Now, let's see how we can make our way to Cuthbert. The best way to find out what needs to be connected is to play the scene and see for ourselves. But instead of switching over to play mode, we can start time in edit mode by clicking R3. Aha! Well, this is odd. The bridge has fallen down, but the second platform is still floating in place. Why is one object floating while the other is falling? Click L3 to rewind time. Let's check the bridge's tweak menu. Remember, tweak menus allow us to see and change the settings for objects in edit mode. Hover your imp over the bridge, hold L1 and press the square button to open its tweak menu. Tweak menus differ depending on what sort of object you're tweaking. The bridge is a sculpture. Sculptures are pretty complex things, and their tweak menus have lots of pages. To switch pages, use your imp to select the different tabs at the top. Maybe we'll find something on the physical properties page to tell us why the bridge is falling down. Its icon is a Newton's cradle, like one of those desk ornaments where the metal balls bash into each other. Select it with X. This page contains the sculpture's physical properties and attributes. There are lots of buttons and sliders here, but the one we're interested in is the top one. Aha! I thought so. Someone's gone and switched on the movable option. Okay, I admit it. It was me. Well, it wouldn't be much of an adventure if Connie could just stroll across the bridge, would it? Making something movable means it becomes physical. That means that forces in the scene, like collisions, the imp, or in this case gravity, can move it. Luckily, we can stop the bridge from falling down by adding a connector to it, which is exactly what we'll do in the next step, once you're ready to move on. So, all we need to keep the bridge from falling is a piece of string. Not just any piece of string, though. It's what we in the dream shaping business call a string connector. We'll need to attach the other end to something unmovable, like the blue cylinder above the bridge. Start by moving your imp with the left and right sticks until you can see the top of the bridge and the bottom of the blue cylinder. Make sure time is rewound. Click L3 if it isn't. Now open the Assembly menu and select the 3 connected squares to open the Gadgets menu. Look for the button with the joint icon, which will take you to the Connectors sub-menu. You can move the menu with your imp by grabbing it with R2. Select the String button. Its icon is the 2 circles connected by a wavy line. You'll see that a string connector appears on the tip of your imp. Now let's get connecting. You should always make the first connection from the object that won't move. We call this the parent object. In this case, it's the blue cylinder, but it could be something else, like the frame of a door. See the yellow dot on the cylinder? I put that there to show the best place for a connection. So hover over it and press R2 or X to connect the string. The grid snap guide will help you line it up exactly with the yellow spot. When you move your imp now, you'll notice it's tethered to the cylinder. It also has a blue gizmo on the end of it. Now let's stretch that string down to the bridge, all the way to the blue dot. The blue gizmo connects the string to the movable object, which we call the child object. Hover over the blue dot. See how the grid snaps it into line? Let's connect the string there with R2 or X. If your bridge isn't in line, just make sure that time is rewound. Now that the blue gizmo is connected, you can press the circle button to unequip the string connector from your imp. And there you have it. The cylinder and the bridge are connected. Click R3 to start time and check that it's working. Well, it looks a bit wobbly, but it's nothing Connie can't handle. Switch over to play mode and have a go. When you can get Connie across the bridge to the second platform, return to edit mode and rewind time with L3. Time to get Connie over to the third platform. So, the small pink platform and the blue step aren't much use to her right now. But if we make the platform move backwards and forwards, she can hop onto it and cross over. To do that, we'll need a connector called a piston. Go to the Assembly menu, then the Gadgets menu. You'll find the piston in the Connectors section. It's somewhere near the middle and looks like, well, a piston. Now that it's equipped on your imp, you can start connecting. First, press R2 or X to join it to the blue step, which is unmovable, so it's the parent object. To do that, we'll need a connector called a piston. Go to the Assembly menu, then the Gadgets menu. You'll find the piston in the Connectors section. It's somewhere near the middle and looks like, well, a piston. Now that it's equipped on your imp, you can start connecting. First, press R2 or X to join it to the blue step, which is unmovable, so it's the parent object. I've put a yellow dot on it to show you the best place to connect it. Next, connect the blue end to the child object, which is the floating platform. See how Grid Snap keeps the connector perfectly straight? Hover over the blue dot, then press R2 or X. Remember, the child object is the part that needs to be able to move. So when you join a connector to its child, that object will automatically become movable. When you've placed the piston, press circle to unequip it. Click R3 to test the connector. That's more like it. The piston is now moving the platform back and forth. Rewind time with L3. Now Connie might not be too happy if we make her jump on that. So let's calm the piston down a bit. First, open the piston's tweak menu. Hover anywhere over it, hold L1 and press square. If the tweak menu blocks your view of the piston, you can grab it and move it with R2. This white gizmo shows the maximum length and speed of the piston. You can change the speed by adjusting the slider with the clock icon. That's the cycles per minute. Grab the slider by holding X over it with your imp and reduce the value. The further to the left you move, the faster the number will change. It doesn't need to be exact. Somewhere around 15 should do it. But if you want to get a more precise number, you can adjust the slider with the up and down directional buttons instead. Notice how it's slowed down now. Click R3 to see it moving the platform. When you're happy with the speed, close the tweak menu with the close button or use L1 and circle. Then rewind time with L3. Time to switch over to play mode and test out the scene so far. Make sure the platform isn't moving too fast for Connie to jump on. You can always go back to edit mode and tweak the piston until you're happy with it. Once Connie has made it all the way across, rewind time in edit mode and move on to the next step. Alright, there's just one more gap for Connie to cross. We have a plank and a step to attach it to. For the plank to drop down, we'll need it to pivot like a hinge, which means we'll need to use a bolt connector this time. Go into the connectors section in the assembly menu. Select the icon with the nut on it. That's the bolt connector. Now you can connect it just like you did with the string and the piston. And because I'm so nice, I've placed some yellow and blue dots and a sneaky new purple one so that you can see where to make the connections. They're quite close together this time, so move in closer for a good view. Remember, you can use the grab cam on the R1 button to zoom in close. As always, connect the parent object first, the yellow dot. Then you can connect the child object, the blue dot. The grid snap will keep the bolt in a straight line so you don't have to worry about it. Once it's all connected, you can unequip the bolt connector using the circle button. You've probably noticed that there's a purple gizmo halfway along the bolt. That's the pivot which the bolt rotates around. Click R3 to see how it all works. Well, that's not right. It looks like we'll need to reposition the pivot to get the plank moving correctly. Click L3 to rewind time and reset the plank. Now go ahead and grab the purple gizmo with R2. Move it so it's by the purple dot. While you're grabbing the pivot gizmo with R2, press triangle to align it to the grid. Now grab it with L2 and use the sticks to rotate it so its axis goes through the bottom of the plank. The grid snap guide will help you line it up exactly. The child object, in this case the plank, will rotate around that axis. Once it's all lined up, switch over to play mode to test it out. If you've done it correctly, the plank should balance upright. Connie will need to push the plank down, unless, of course, the plank isn't long enough. Oh well, switch back to edit mode and rewind time. We'll sort out the plank in the next step. If you've done it correctly, what's up exactly? The child object, in this case the plank, will rotate around that axis. Once it's all lined up, switch over to play mode to test it out. If you've done it correctly, the plank should balance upright. Connie will need to push the plank down, unless, of course, the plank isn't long enough. Oh well, switch back to edit mode and rewind time. We'll sort out the plank in the next step. To make sure Connie can reach the last platform, we could always make the plank longer, but that's a completely different tutorial. Instead, let's try restricting the bolt's movement. We can do that by giving it an angle limit. First, you'll need to bring up the bolt's tweak menu. So hover over any part of the bolt, hold L1 and press square. You should see the Use Limits button about halfway down. Select it with X. And look at that. 3 handles have appeared, 2 pale yellow ones and a longer pale blue one. The yellow ones set the range of movement, which is represented by the transparent arc between them. We need to move one of these yellow handles so it's just a little bit left of vertical. It should look like an 11 o'clock position. First, you'll need to bring up the bolt's tweak menu. So hover over any part of the bolt, hold L1 and press square. You should see the Use Limits button about halfway down. Select it with X. And look at that. 3 handles have appeared, 2 pale yellow ones and a longer pale blue one. The yellow ones set the range of movement, which is represented by the transparent arc between them. We need to move one of these yellow handles so it's just a little bit left of vertical. It should look like an 11 o'clock position. Now move the other yellow handle to a 3 o'clock position. If your handle doesn't line up exactly, just press triangle while you're grabbing it. This will realign the handle to the grid. The blue handle represents the position of the child object, so you need to line it up with the plank in the 12 o'clock position. Press triangle to realign the handle to the grid if necessary. You can close the tweak menu now and head into play mode to test the scene. If everything's working correctly, Connie should be able to reach Cuthbert. And if you feel like experimenting, you can try out some other connector types. See what you can come up with. Then, when you're done editing the scene, go through the door in play mode to finish this tutorial. Working correctly, Connie should be able to play plank in the 12 o'clock plank. Look like an 11 o'clock transparent arc between them. We need to move one of these yellow handles so it's just a little bit left of vertical. It should look like an 11 o'clock position. Now move the other yellow handle to a 3 o'clock position. If your handle doesn't line up exactly, just press triangle while you're grabbing it. This will realign the handle to the grid. The blue handle represents the position of the child object, so you need to line it up with the plank in the 12 o'clock position. Press triangle to realign the handle to the grid if necessary. You can close the tweak menu now and head into play mode to test the scene. Play mode. You can close the tweak menu now and head into play mode to test the scene. If everything's working correctly, Connie should be able to reach Cuthbert. And if you feel like experimenting, you can try out some other connector types. See what you can come up with. Then, when you're done editing the scene, go through the door in play mode to finish this tutorial.
This is the video library. We've got everything here. How-to videos, tutorials, masterclasses. They can all be watched while you edit, or enjoyed on their own, here in the Dreamiverse.